Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! Back in the early 90s, I got a gig working as a front-of-house sound engineer on a major 10-day music and arts festival in London's Docklands, with some 15 stages dotted all around the waterfront. All of the crew working the stages were either experienced theater techs or had loads of experience working major outside events, which is the reason we were hired. As an aside, this festival was to celebrate the culmination of a massive investment in the redevelopment of this area of East London itself, the former site of one of the largest dock complexes in the world. I was tasked with running the front of the house sound on one of the largest stages. Normally, events like this are loads of fun to work, but within 2 days it became apparent that the organizers had 1. No idea of how to run major outside events, and 2. Had not the faintest idea of how to book acts and schedule the same. In particular, we also had to contend with some woman from Docklands' middle management team who had been given a job of overseeing our particular stage. A person who not only had rapidly proved to be totally ignorant of any aspect of managing outside events, but also someone for whom the word entitled had been invented. Our stage was licensed to run events from midday until 10 p.m., but we rarely had a full day's worth of events for punters to enjoy, due to the aforementioned incompetence with booking. Still not our problem. We will just work with what's given to us. On Thursday, we had scheduled an evening of old-time Victorian music hall, which featured as special guest a very famous film and TV actress. Her performance rider required a grand piano, and for some unfathomable reason, and again due to the incompetence of the organizers, the piano, a full-size Yamaha concert grand, arrived from the hire company on Tuesday. This was a remarkably stupid idea for any number of reasons. Due to operational consideration, we had to store the piano in the backstage area where it spent 2 days suffering in the heat of the day, despite our best efforts to shield it. As any piano technician/tuner will tell you, this is an extremely bad idea, especially with an instrument worth close to £100,000. Almost as bad was the fact that our area was little more than a roughly graded building site. The ground was covered in hardcore rubble fragments around the size of hen's eggs, very uncomfortable to walk around on, even with proper work boots, which also kicked up loads of dust and other detritus. Not the sort of crap you want floating about gumming up the works of a very expensive concert grand. Now let me properly set the scene. It's midsummer, very hot, and our venue is a large circus-style tent with around 800 seat capacity. The cast of the show, along with our august star, were due to turn up at around 1 p.m. to conduct a production rehearsal so we could sort out sound and lighting cues for the show. The main cast duly turn up on time and we start sorting out their technical requirements. Pretty simple and nothing that we're not used to. At about 1:30 p.m., our star turns up sporting dark glasses and an immaculate couture. As anyone who's worked in this industry knows, the initial interaction with a major A-list star vis-a-vis their technical requirements can go one of 2 ways. Full Monty Diva, or let's go with what we have. Her first demand was that the piano be dropped off the front of the stage so that she could maintain an eye line while standing right downstage. Both with her pianist and with the audience. The stage was about 4.5 feet above ground level and would have required at least 80 burly lads to safely shift a full-sized concert grand off the deck. Also not a good idea since it had been tuned that morning and moving it would have almost certainly caused the tuning to go out of whack. I delicately pointed out that doing so would be in direct violation of both health and safety, and also fire regulations as per our written policy, as it would have put the piano in both the fire lane and close to one of the primary emergency exits from the venue. Thinking rapidly, I then suggested that we place the piano as far downstage as physically possible, and that she page herself 3 or 4 feet upstage so that she could still glance over and take cues from her MD whilst still taking in the audience. The tension was palpable. After a few seconds consideration, she replied, "No problem, I can work with that." Phew! No sooner than this crisis had been averted than a Docksland rip rocked up. I remind you, gentle reader, that this person had absolutely zero knowledge about how to run an outside event. She had also been a major thorn in our side for the previous week, trying to micromanage proceedings in the venue in order to big herself up in front of her bosses. We, of course, completely ignored her suggestions, but in such way as made her think she was in charge. Trust me, she wasn't. She also had been inexcusably rude to virtually every single member of the crew from day one, and had over the days previous reduced several of them to tears. Production crews don't take kindly to our own being treated in such a cavalier fashion, and while we're generally fairly thick-skinned, there comes a point where we want to get our own back. Believe me, after a week of constant abuse, we were coming up with creative ways of disposing of the body. Although we didn't realize it at the time, our savior was at hand. But I digress. Obviously starstruck, she announced in gushing tones that she would be taking personal charge of our star's every need and that we were not to concern ourselves with that aspect. Indeed, we were to keep our place as we were only the hired help. Our stage manager, who was at the time sweeping the stage, bridled at the suggestion and made it as if to use his broom to beat brains out of this woman. I had to step in front of him as unobtrusively as possible and stop him from burying this woman right there and then. "She ain't worth it, mate." She then swanned off, leaving our star slack-jawed in amazement. She then turned to me and said, "Is that woman for real?" I replied, "Darling, you have no idea." At which point she laughed uproariously. I gave our star a brief summary of the previous few days' farrago, and instantly she became one of us, and from then on, we were all on first-name terms. We then ran a full tech rehearsal from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m., sorted out all our cues, and then repaired to the beer tent with a cast for a spot of late lunch and a drink or two. The show was scheduled to kick off at 7:30 p.m. At around 6 p.m., the harridan reappeared to overlook the situation. She noticed that we had all the sides of the tent raised in order to get some air flowing through. Remember, it's midsummer and it's currently low to mid-80s. She then demanded that all of the tent flaps be lowered because she wanted a more theater atmosphere, and the light spilling through the side walls would spoil the effect. Despite pointing out that dropping the tent sides would significantly raise the temperature in the venue, she demanded the sides be dropped. So despite our earnest advice to the contrary, we reluctantly complied. At around 7 p.m., we saw 8 50-seat coaches arrive. To our amazement, out from the coaches came an entire flotilla of old-age pensioners, many on Zimmer frames, who proceeded to shuffle their way into the tent across the hardcore rubble underfoot. We discovered later that the organizers had forgotten to advertise the event anywhere. Seriously? And in desperation, had gone around to all the local Derby and Joan clubs a couple of days before handing out free tickets and laying on transport in order to have an audience. So now we have 400-odd OAPs frantically fanning themselves with anything to hand as the temperature climbs ever higher. We start the show, everything's going fine, but the mercury in the thermometer I have strapped to the front of the house rack is slowly going up and up. It's so hot at the sound desk that I'm down to my shorts. By the end of Act 1, the temperature had gone up to around 94 Fahrenheit, and one could clearly see the old deer were in a bad distress. Naturally, the organizers had neglected to provide water for the public, and judging by the horrified expressions of the 2 St. John's ambulance first aiders stationed either side of the stage, things were about to get a lot worse. I climbed off the tower, found the rigging crew, and ordered the sides of the tent raised. No sooner had I done so than our friend standing nearby demanded that the sides stay down because she was in charge and my instructions are to be followed, absolutely no questions. It was at this juncture that diplomacy went completely out of the window. I informed her in no uncertain terms, and employing a fair amount of Anglo-Saxon vernacular, that it was in fact the crew who had the responsibility of ensuring the health and safety of all the people in the venue, not her. and that we have the legal authority to enact any procedure that we see fit at any time to ensure the safety and well-being of everyone present. I then informed her that I was now exercising my authority under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 to remediate the situation, and that if she made one single attempt to circumvent that authority, I would have her ejected from the venue without hesitation. She then got in my face and screamed, "I'm in charge!" No strike 1, no strike 2, instant strike 3. I looked over at two of our security crew who had been hovering in the background with huge grins on their faces, who then stepped up either side of her. Defeated but complaining like a banshee with a terminal case of hemorrhoids, she was escorted out of the premises in short order. By the time Act 2 kicked off, we'd gotten the temperature down to a more manageable low 70s. Much to the appreciation of our audience, and the rest of the show went off without a hitch. After the show, cast and crew, including our August star, returned to the bar for a well-earned drink. Moments later, you know who appeared then. In imperious tones informed us that our star was to be the guest of honor at a VIP reception for the various Docklands bigwigs. With a tinge of regret for having our fun curtailed prematurely, we said our goodbyes to our star. Now it's getting interesting. Not 10 minutes later, she stormed back into the beer tent with a face like absolute thunder. Taken somewhat aback by her reappearance, we inquired as to why she had returned. That woman. She drags me off to this so-called VIP party. I get there and all that's there are 2 plates of curled up ham sandwiches and 2 boxes of cheap wine from Sainsbury's. How did she get this job? I gave her a right bloody earful and came back here because I'd much rather drink with you guys. At which point she calls a barman over and orders a round for the entire crew. We spent the rest of the evening chatting away like old friends. She regaled us with stories of her life, and she was gracious enough to listen to some of ours. Despite us trying to buy her a drink, she refused point blank and picked up the entire bar tab for the rest of the evening on a basis that you've had to put up with that evil witch all week. The least I can do is get you folks a drink. All good things must come to an end, and at the end of the evening, her chauffeur turns up to take her home. She embraces all of us as old friends. She hugs me, plants a big kiss on my lips, and thanks me. Whereupon I comment, "You have just fulfilled a boyhood dream." Again, that uproarious laugh. She looks at me and says, "Don't let that witch get you down. Leave it to me." I later discovered through the back channels, some weeks later, that our pet noir had been fired from her 5-figure job for her monster screw-up, primarily because our star's agent had ripped the organizers a new one in very short order. You don't screw with someone of our star's track record without there being consequences. So although we were not directly responsible for the Harridan's demise, we were gratified to have someone of our star's caliber standing up for us. Revenge is a dish best served cold. I'm a dance teacher, and there is this one parent, the entitled mother, that I've had issues with. She used to do dance lessons and brags about having a grade 3 in dance, which is not that good by the way, and now she stays for the full lesson. No other parents do this, and stands off to one side calling out instructions to her kid. Most of the time these instructions are wrong, and all of the time it distracts from my lesson in a big way. She's also clearly seen one too many episodes of Dance Moms because she's always talking to other parents saying her kid is clearly the best dancer, and even though we're not a competitive team and these are only lessons, she'll talk about how her kid deserves more attention from me and how if we did contests, she would win everyone. All the students know to ignore her, especially when she's backseat teaching. But when I'm calling out instructions and another voice is giving completely different instructions, then it's going to confuse them. Her daughter, IK, is an incredible dancer. IK is 10. She's been dancing since she was 4, and she's at a level I'd expect of someone much older. She's talented, she understands rhythm, she has skill and control, and she wants to be here. She's a joy to teach. My only issue with her is her mother, and I've done my best not to let the mother interfere with my teaching. I've tried to get the entitled mother to leave, but due to bureaucratic nonsense, I can't kick her out of the room. Just ask her politely to step out and she can say no. which she does. I have power over the students as their teacher, but the parents pay for the sessions, so they are essentially the customer. And the customer is always right, even when they are wrong. Both myself and my TA have talked to her and asked her to stop, and it's never worked. Sometimes she'll say okay and then be quiet for 10 minutes or so. Maybe the rest of the class if we're lucky. But by next lesson, at least, she will be at it again. I've spoken to the director of the school and he said unless he personally gets an overwhelming number of complaints about the entitled mother from other parents, then there is nothing he can do. The parents do complain about her frequently, but it's always to me and not the director. I tell them to go to the director and talk to him directly because I can't do anything with the limited power he gives me, but either none of them are complaining to him or they are not complaining frequently enough. In any case, he's always said that he needs more before he can make any move against her. So the other day I'm teaching my class, the entitled mother is there and she's calling out instructions, making kids lean and turn the wrong way, and eventually she tells IK, her daughter, to launch on the wrong foot and IK collides with another student. It's not too bad, no injuries, but they fall and then everyone around them stops. Out of sheer frustration, my dumb self looks at the entitled mother and says, in the most sarcastic way possible, do you want to come up here and teach the lesson? And she does. This crazy witch stands at the front of the room and starts to talk the kids through the steps, once again getting them completely wrong. Poor IK is on the verge of tears and gesturing for her mom to stop, and I yell over her that we are going to take a 10-minute break and then I'll add the time on to the end of the session. I then leave the room, go to the director's office, grab a stack of the common cards he leaves outside his door, bring them back to where some of the parents are standing outside of the studio, give them roughly half the cards and tell them, if you want the entitled mother gone, this is how you do it, and tell them they can find the box to return them outside the director's office. I then go to the cafe where the other parents tend to sit and get work done while they wait for their kids and give them the gist of what's going on. I don't even need to say her name. Everyone has been to a session and watched her scream at their children and talk over me, the teacher they have hired. I put the rest of the cards on the nearest table, tell them the same thing as the other parents, and get back to my class. On arrival, I find out that the entitled mother has continued to teach the whole time I was gone. My TA did her best to stop her and correct the kids, but enough damage has been done that when we go through the routine one more time, they have gone from being pretty much in sync and knowing it by heart to falling over each other and screwing up the steps. It's been a couple of days and the director has emailed me yesterday saying that he's had several complaints about the entitled mother specifically, so he's going to contact her, saying that she's not allowed to sit in on classes anymore. She can either sit in her car or go to the cafe for the duration of the lesson. If she comes in, I'm allowed to kick her out as of now, and if she tries anything then after that, the girl's father can bring her. I then had a lesson today with a girl, and the entitled mother showed up and was standing outside for about 5 minutes before she came in and went back to calling out instructions. She is now permanently banned from the art school I work at and her daughter's dance lessons. And I asked at the reception and they confirmed that the girl's father has added himself to the visitor sheet for next week's session. So not my story. I'm just a witness. It happened in my final year of my engineering college. When the exam schedule was declared, the university would release the exam form which students were supposed to download, fill them and submit them into college. Usually students would get 2 weeks to do this, which is more than enough time. We boys, for whatever reason, procrastinated until the last time, while girls usually had submitted their forms in the beginning itself. So there I was, standing in line, waiting for my turn to submit the form. These were 2 lines, one for boys and one for girls. Boys' line was pretty long when I joined, about 30, while the girls' line was about 5 people. After I spent about 90 minutes in line, I finally got into the first 5 in a line. And that's when this incident happened. There was a girl at the end of the girls' line carrying a clipboard. It had her exam form on it. A guy suddenly came and placed his exam form on her clipboard and told her to submit his exam form. His entire attitude was extremely rude. His words sounded like an order. I thought she was going to slap him, but she didn't. Instead, she took his form and gave him a sweet smile. I thought I misjudged the situation. It's possible to submit other people's forms, but you have to go back and stand in line again. I thought maybe the girl was his friend or something and was willing to do him a favor. It didn't look like she knew him, but given she had just smiled instead of confronting him, I just ignored it. I put this odd act out of my mind and waited for my turn. When there were two guys in front of me, the girl reached the end of the girls' line. She gave the clerk her form and had it submitted. She left the line and then walked towards the rude guy. He looked surprised that she had not rejoined the line. She waved his exam form in front of him, again gave him a sweet smile, and just dropped it on the floor. She never said a single word to him. Everybody who was watching understood what she had done. If she had immediately told him to get lost, he would have just joined the boys' line, which had around 30 people. She made him waste time by keeping his form with her, and by the time she had submitted her own form, the boys' line had increased to more than 50 people. Pretty much everyone burst into laughter. The guy who was so smug before took his form and just left from there. I had no idea when he submitted his form, probably on a later day, which must have cost him a late fine. That was the best act of revenge I had seen. P.S. There seems to be a bit of misunderstanding. What everyone was submitting was an exam form for a semester. It contained a list of subjects students had taken for the current semester, both theoretical and practical, as well as any backlog subjects students had from the previous semester. Based on what the student submitted in this form, he or she would receive a hall ticket for the upcoming exam for those subjects. There were no questions or answers in this. This whole thing happens before the actual exam. Not submitting this form means you won't get hall tickets and thus won't be allowed to sit in the exams. University does make exceptions in rare cases, but you gotta have a very valid and provable reason for it.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.